Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore Iowa stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we're talking about prisons in Iowa and the challenges they face. Without firsthand knowledge, most of us have no idea of what going to prison really means. Though we can't change the fact that the prospect of going to prison does not sound like a good thing, people are working hard to help make good things happen for people in the prison system. We're joined by Cord Overton and Dr. Jerome Greenfield from the Iowa Department of Corrections to get an inside look at how prison life is changing in Iowa. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thanks.
Cord, start us out and just give us a little overview of what's happening with prisons in Iowa.
Sure. Let's start from a really high level. Okay. In Iowa, and a lot of people might not realize this, but their Department of Corrections has 9 correctional facilities throughout the state. We're pretty much located all around the state of Iowa, and those 9 facilities house roughly 8,400 incarcerated individuals at any given time, give or take a little bit. And then in addition, we also work very closely with the 8 Judicial District Department of Correctional Services. Those are the districts that are providing probation, parole, work release supervision to people in the community that have been sentenced to their supervision. So that's, probation, people on the front end that had been convicted of a crime and sentenced to probation services, so a supervision, and then parole, people on the back end that are coming out of a correctional institution but still under supervision in the community. And at any given time, there's roughly 30,000 people across Iowa that are under those supervision conditions.
That's a rather large number.
I guess that's relative. In certain states, those ratios look a little bit different. Here in Iowa, again, we've got that 8,400 in prison and the 30,000 under community supervision. And generally, it's a model that's worked okay for the state of Iowa. Those numbers haven't fluctuated too much over the last 10, 15 years.
That's pretty interesting. Mm-hmm. Doctor, you have a valuable role with Department of Corrections. What is it that you do?
So at the current time, I oversee the overall medical care at all 9 prisons. The medical care, mental health care, the dental care, optometry services. At every one of the 9 prisons, we have our own contained medical clinic, staffed by nurses 24/7, and each clinic also has their own medical provider. In addition, we have 27 psychologists spread throughout the 9 prisons as well. We have 10 psychiatrists. We have approximately 6 part-time psychiatrists as well. So we have a large medical and mental health staff to care for the needs of the 8,400 patients that Cord was talking about.
And that's one of the reasons we've wanted to do this show, because that it is, the prison population is sort of an at-risk population. And in the public sector, everybody's complaining about not enough services being available for everyone else. How does the ebb and flow of that need for services and what you can provide work within the Department of Corrections?
Well, we all of the men, when they're sentenced to prison, go to our facility in Coralville. All the women go to the facility in Mitchellville. And from there, through a well-organized intake system, through security, nursing, psychology, and the physicians, we all work together as a team to try to meet in a multi-dimensional way these complex medical needs. In addition, there's a lot of communication among the facilities as well. If a person is too ill to stay at a certain facility, they may get transferred somewhere else. So there's just a lot of communication among all of these providers. And I help orchestrate that. The other medical director helps orchestrate that, director of nursing as well. So it's just a good healthcare team working together to run our own medical system.
Is it safe to say then that it's almost like a city responsible for every aspect of managing that population, because they're safely, basically insulated from contact with the general public when they're in prison?
I think that's very well put. It's just like each individual clinic is its own entity. But at the same time, we have a system where we all communicate with one another as well.
Do you find that, this sounds optimistic, it sounds really good. Now, what's the sort of the road meeting the tire? How do prison inmates feel about these services? Do they meet them graciously? Are they happy to get them? Or is it something where it's like the reluctant mistress that you're trying to help them in spite of themselves? What's the climate like?
I don't think there's an easy, straightforward answer to that very good question. I think for many of them, it takes time to develop trust. I started out as the psychiatrist at the women's prison in Mitchellville, and it was difficult at first being a man in a women's prison, because many of those women had led really complicated lives of trauma and abuse. It took them a while to trust me. But likewise, a lot of men are also survivors of trauma as well. So I think in all of our institutions, it takes some time, some patience, and I think we've had some great success stories. We've had other patients that probably didn't care for some of the services that we've offered, just like it is in the community. I don't think it's really a lot different than providing medical services out in the community as well.
That's fascinating. We'll take a short break and come back. When we do come back from the break, we'll continue our inside look at Iowa prisons and how they influence your community. You don't want to miss this. See you after the break.
One gig is the future, and Mediacom provides the most complete coverage. America's first 100% 1 gig technology network, offering gigabit speeds in every market we serve. In town or out of town, big city or rural, you've got access to the fastest. We know the future will demand more speed, so we've built a network to give you the most. 1,500 communities, 2.7 million homes, 100% 1 gig.
After the rain stops and the wind dies down, when the fire's gone out and the dust settles, we rise up together and become a force of nature all our own. As part of this community, Mediacom stands with you, doing everything we can not only to restore your service, but to help provide emergency communication access, assist relief efforts, and support our neighbors.
CenturyLink loves to talk about their 1 gig internet, but you can't get it at Beth's house or John's house. It's not available in JoJo's neighborhood or within 100 miles of the Smith family. The truth is, CenturyLink 1 gig isn't for everyone. Make sure you have access to the fastest. Switch to Mediacom Extreme and get the future-forward speed you need from the 100% gigabit technology network, the fastest for everyone.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with a couple of experts from the Iowa Department of Corrections, Dr. Jerome Greenfield and Cord Overton. We're talking about prison life and some of the goals of Iowa leaders to build a stronger path to healing. Join us as we continue the conversation. Dr. Greenfield, there have been some big changes in what's happening, and it's really not much different, as you said, as to what happens in the community. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in the system to help people.
In a way, we talk about change, but I think what we've done in the Department of Corrections as a medical team is that we've gone back to the way it used to be when I was a young physician in the 1980s. In May, I'll be out of medical school for 35 years. And there was a time when we had time to work as a multidisciplinary team. The physicians, the psychologists, the nurses, other types of therapists, we would work together. As I saw my medical career progress in the community, that didn't happen. We didn't have the time to work together, to focus on an issue. Now we have team meetings, multidisciplinary team meetings. Discharge planning for many people in prison starts the day they get there, because we need to be able to realize that many of these people are going to leave. Some will have much longer sentences. But for many of them, it means we have to start working as a team to find resources for them on the outside. We identify a set of problems, be they mental health, medical, or other types of issues. We address those and also start finding resources on the outside for which I can pass on the baton. And that's what I think I'm most proud of. You know, we aren't struggled with third-party payments inside the prison. We have a budget and we use that budget. So we can be more creative. We can have more time to do things than they can on the outside.
Well, and I get a sense that one of the complaints on the outside is people don't complete treatment programs. You actually have a pretty good understanding of how long you have the patient.
Exactly. And we can tailor that to what they're going to require. And we've come up with innovative programs that we think work. We do a lot of research. We find evidence-based programs that have proven the test of time. And from some of our new programs, we're very optimistic. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback, not only from our patients, but from outside providers as well.
So if I'm a parent or friend or know somebody going to prison, and maybe I would know that person's had some troubles, maybe with drugs and other behavioral problems, there'd be a reason for me to have hope that they're going to the right place to get some help that they may need.
I am very proud of the work that my colleagues and I have done to recruit top quality healthcare providers to the Iowa Department of Corrections. And I think because it's become more difficult to practice on the outside, they see the correctional healthcare model as an opportunity not just to help other patients, but to improve the quality of their lives from a completely different point of view of practicing medicine, which is exactly why I joined in 2014.
So now let's get to where the dummy that knows nothing about prison talks to the experts. We watch a lot of television, and so if you ask me the question, well, they go to prison, they can get drugs anyway. Because I look at every TV show about prisons have people trafficking drugs and gangs running everything. Is there a problem with drug trafficking in prisons in Iowa?
I mean, it can happen. It's possible, but it's very complicated. And I think that our security staff are constantly looking at ways to prevent this. They're always on guard for that particular problem. We know that exists. And also the fact that we've trained so many of our correctional staff in terms of what mental symptoms look like, what to look for, what are side effects and the profile of someone who is using drugs. We're trying to stay on top of that issue as much as we can.
To say that there will be a day where there is a zero contraband issue in a prison, it's a little bit facetious. But we're working really hard with the various security directors around the department to look at their individual prisons' needs as it comes to how might contraband be getting in, and making sure we're plugging those holes as we find them, and really doubling down on making sure that we're having safe, rehabilitative environments for the people that are incarcerated with us.
When I was first exploring the idea of doing the show, and I talked to you and a couple other people, I got the distinct impression that what a prison was 15 or 20 years ago is a big difference from what they are today. That we've really come a long way, and that you're on the leading edge of facing some of the most difficult challenges with some of the new drugs and other things happening, but yet you have, basically you're building a safe place for people coming from very unsafe backgrounds. How are you able to contend with that pressure, knowing that you're putting people back out in the street? Tell me a little bit about how you grapple with that. Because I mean, it seems to me like it wouldn't be an unwelcome place to be if you're in deep trouble and you've been busted and you've got to spend some time. You'd want to be in a compassionate setting like the one you're describing.
Well, I think what we try to do is just the basic tenet of what we try to do is instill hope. That change can occur. And they'll say, oh, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this. I said, but this is a completely different environment. There are people here around the clock to assist you. And I think when they see that we have the time to spend with them, we have time to contact families, we have the time to obtain outside records, and then bring all that information together, I think that's what makes our healthcare system maybe a little different than some other systems that are available. But instilling hope is what we try to do.
Right, and you get there by focusing on really three major priorities in the department. First is security and safety. It has to be paramount because it's foundational to everything else that we're trying to do inside the Department of Corrections. And that means security and safety of our staff, but also the safety of the incarcerated individuals, which we're charged for caring for. And then you get into, once you've got that security and safety developed, you get into treatment and programming and addressing those needs that make people less risky. The reality is over 90% of them are going to be leaving the institutions. They're coming back out to the communities. And so we need to do our job to make sure before they get out that we've addressed some of those needs that caused them to commit the crime in the first place. And once you get that security, that treatment and programming, you can really then hyper-focus on reentry. And that's something that we're turning our attention to in a major way as a department.
Those are all great points, because I tell you what, if I ask people to say, when you hear the word prison, do you think hope or hopeless? I think hopeless would be the most common choice, but what we're hearing today is hope is a good one. So we'll continue this conversation after the break. When we return, we'll ask our guests to talk more about the challenge of substance abuse, the meth crisis, and what programs they have that are helping people get back into the world and be productive. You don't want to miss it. Thank you.
One gig is the future, and Mediacom provides the most complete coverage. America's first 100% 1 gig technology network, offering gigabit speeds in every market we serve. In town or out of town, big city or rural, you've got access to the fastest. We know the future will demand more speed, so we've built a network to give you the most. 1,500 communities, 2.7 million homes, 100% 1 gig.
After the rain stops and the wind dies down, when the fire's gone out and the dust settles, we rise up together and become a force of nature all our own. As part of this community, Mediacom stands with you, doing everything we can not only to restore your service, but to help provide emergency communication access, assist relief efforts, and support our neighbors.
CenturyLink loves to talk about their 1 gig internet, but you can't get it at Beth's house or John's house. It's not available in JoJo's neighborhood or within 100 miles of the Smith family. The truth is, CenturyLink 1 gig isn't for everyone. Make sure you have access to the fastest. Switch to Mediacom Extreme and get the future-forward speed you need from the 100% gigabit technology network, the fastest for everyone.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm Peter Komendowski, your host. For most of us, it's hard to imagine prison in a positive way. Thankfully, Iowa is working hard to make prisons a source of healing and education that can help people faced with prison find a path to hope and inspiration. Let's take a closer look at what some of those programs are and some of the innovations and what they mean to your community. Cord, start us off. Talk to us about what, the business of the correction system and how it works and some of the programs you have that are exciting.
Yeah, so a major focus of the department right now is trying to build on human capital so that when these individuals are coming back out to the community, when they're leaving our institution, they're going to be in a better place than when they first came in, much more likely to be successful upon that reentry. Reentry itself has so many hurdles to go through. If we can help lower some of those barriers, some of those hurdles as people are going back out, it's going to help them get that job. It's going to help them probably reconnect with their family, become more stabilized in their community, start paying their taxes, paying any unpaid court fines and fees and restitutions that they owe. And so what we're doing inside the prisons right now, in addition to some of the treatment that I think we'll talk about in a little bit, is making sure that people have the right education and the right training so that when they walk out, they can walk right into a job. That's easier said than done. I mean, a lot of work and a lot of resources go into that. Some of the things that we're really proud of is when it comes to our educational offerings, we're making sure that if you're coming into Iowa Corrections, that you're at least working towards getting what we call a high set. It's essentially the high school equivalency, because that's such a fundamental certificate to have when you're going out and applying for jobs around the state of Iowa. They really want you to have that high set. So we make it a big priority when people get in to get them working on that high set.
And you've been successful to do that? You have a great rate of success there?
We have outstanding partnerships with the community colleges around Iowa. They're the ones actually coming in and teaching the classes on contract with us in our institutions. So community college professors are teaching high school classes inside the prisons. And by and large, they're doing a great job with our incarcerated individuals. In fact, we're even looking at how we can expand upon those that are getting it, that are kind of that under that 21 threshold, and really even ramp up. And that small percentage of people that are incarcerated that aren't working on it, how can we get them motivated and working on getting their high set no matter what their age is? So that's a big priority for us, but a really exciting opportunity that's we've been kind of capitalizing on with partners in the community over the last several years is that post-secondary education. Because it can be so valuable when you're going back out and you're looking for that job. If you've got some highly developed skills that you got through a post-secondary education, such as we have a partnership with Iowa Central Community College, and they're in several of our institutions providing Second Chance Pell Grant scholarships, using those to get that post-secondary education. In addition, we've got partnerships with the University of Iowa and Grinnell where they're teaching classes in the institutions, but something we're really excited about and trying to expand upon is our registered apprenticeship programs. The graphic that's being displayed now kind of highlights some of those programs that are being offered. We work with our friends at the Iowa Workforce Development, the U.S. Department of Labor, and we've created these certified apprenticeship programs. They're U.S. DOL certified programs where while you're incarcerated, you can be working on that welding apprenticeship, that plumbing apprenticeship, electrician apprenticeship, so that when you walk out of our institution, you might walk out with your apprenticeship certifications in hand, ready to go to the job site. We're excited about where this is going to take us in the future. We're going to keep investing in these programs because not only are they giving people skills that'll be very valuable and in high demand out in the community, but they're creating a culture inside the institutions that is generally positive, that we're working on the future. We're not just sitting here being warehoused, passing our time day to day while we're incarcerated. We're working on something and building towards our future.
And about building that culture, because so many people come in with mental health and drug problems. You've innovated some new methodologies that are really successful now.
I hope we have, and to get to the point where they can finish the programs that Cord talked about, we have the task of making sure we have the right diagnosis, making sure that they're sober, and making sure that we can get them in the programming to maintain their wellness. Again, we have a large mental health staff that have to deal with very complicated psychiatric issues. Is it drugs? Is it mental illness? Is it other types of trauma? Is it possibly even a learning disability they've had for years? So we take these complicated scenarios, try to kind of refine that, try to find out what the exact problem is, and from there then we can put them in various forms of therapy. One in particular is actually an older type of therapy that we've brought back called moral recognition therapy, a type of therapy where it really forces that person to look at the impact of their actions, almost a radical acceptance of what's happened in their life, and through the help of other mentors and peers that have a lot in common, it's this kind of group rehabilitative model. And it's been well received. We've seen some great outcomes. We're really proud of the work that we've done.
I bet there'd be some wonderful case studies of people finding hope and inspiration that didn't see it before. Thanks for sharing. When we come back from the break, we'd like you to share some advice for our viewers. And when Dr. Greenfield and Cord return, we're going to ask them to give us some insights and advice that can maybe help you understand some things that can help you or someone you love better deal with the idea of prison, maybe stay out of prison altogether. We'll be right back after the break.
One gig is the future, and Mediacom provides the most complete coverage. America's first 100% 1 gig technology network, offering gigabit speeds in every market we serve. In town or out of town, big city or rural, you've got access to the fastest. We know the future will demand more speed, so we've built a network to give you the most. 1,500 communities, 2.7 million homes, 100% 1 gig.
After the rain stops and the wind dies down, when the fire's gone out and the dust settles, we rise up together and become a force of nature all our own. As part of this community, Mediacom stands with you, doing everything we can not only to restore your service, but to help provide emergency communication access, assist relief efforts, and support our neighbors.
CenturyLink loves to talk about their 1 gig internet, but you can't get it at Beth's house or John's house. It's not available in JoJo's neighborhood or within 100 miles of the Smith family. The truth is, CenturyLink 1 gig isn't for everyone. Make sure you have access to the fastest. Switch to Mediacom Extreme and get the future-forward speed you need. From the 100% gigabit technology network, the fastest for everyone.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. Our guests, Dr. Greenfield and Cord Overton, have shown us a side of corrections that can inspire hope. Let's see what they think we can do as Iowans to better understand prison, not as a last resort, but rather as a first step in the right direction. Doctor, talking to people that may know someone in prison or someone going to prison, what advice would you give them to be a healthy part of this process?
Well, you know, I would hope that they would have an ongoing relationship with their friend, their loved one, their family member, go through the proper channels to make sure you're on the visiting list, and actually come to prison in the visiting room to see what the environment is like. Recently, I've recruited a lot of new medical personnel. Every single one of them was just absolutely astounded at what they saw, that it wasn't this dark, miserable, scary place, that there was a lot of interaction with people. It was very rehabilitative. much different than you'd see in movies and on television. I would highly encourage them to come to visit.
If they
Take
come to
interest in
visit,
people.
does it help the outcome of the people in prison?
I can't help but think that it wouldn't, because like I'd said earlier, people need hope. They want hope that people still care for them. They believe in their treatment, their rehabilitative process. I know they'd like to see them.
Those are great points. Cord?
We are at a point where we're releasing about 6,000 individuals every year out of incarceration back into the community. Most of that under parole supervision. So there's certain conditions they have
That's
to
a
meet
decent-sized town every year.
that are
Put
coming
back
out.
on. Yep.
And what we're hearing is around the state that there are jobs looking for people. And a major factor that's going to make somebody more likely to be successful once they re-enter is if they land a quality job. And these are sometimes people that are going to be really grateful for that job, want to hold it, and they might have the skills that you're looking for. If you're an employer, you might want to take a second look at somebody that might have a criminal history and ask them about it. Don't be afraid to, ask, okay, how are you doing now? And these might be some of the best employees you've ever hired. So we would encourage employers to take a good look at somebody that might have a history in the past.
So you're talking about a community-based role that's compassionate, in the same way that maybe the prison system is evolving to have a little bit more compassion for the needs of people.
We try to,
Right.
but knowing the fact that there are people that are there that have committed heinous crimes. There are other people there that have crimes that are far less severe. So it's again, the situation is different for every person, but for those especially that are coming out, we need to have a specific program, and for those that are there that are staying long, we need to provide them with a program as well.
So there's not like a lowest common denominator. There's a lot of different people in this prison population, and they're able to get the services they need, the care they need, and the health, safety, and welfare they need to heal.
Yes.
Absolutely. And with over 90% of them returning to the community someday, it's going to be on more than just Iowa Corrections to try to keep these people out and on successful reentry paths.
Well, thank you so very much for sharing this story today, and I hope people watching this recognize that there's a path of hope and inspiration in prison.
Thank you.
Not a bad thing. It's interesting to see a side of prison that can take desperation and help turn into hope and inspiration. God knows we need to see more of that. Thank you for joining us on Surviving Bad, and keep your eye on Mediacom MC22 for our next episodes as we explore Iowa stories of survival, hope, and inspiration, only on Mediacom MC22, your local programming leader.